Good afternoon. This is a presentation of the 8864 firmware that was recently released, version 6.01 R53. What you can see on the screen here is the release notes. Much of the material I'll be talking about and just discuss the bugs and features that were introduced, demonstrate them a little bit, and then open the floor for any questions. So that having been said, let's talk a little bit about where we are in the release. Right now we are up to 6.01 R53. R53 had a couple of modifications over R52. R52 was the initial version 6.01 release. If you have version 6.01 R52, you need to go ahead and get R53. We QA'd this version for quite a long time. We always QA the versions as we go. As features are added, we are testing them, and we have an automated testing framework that we use against the firmware. But it seems like no matter how much testing we do, there's always some combination of settings that leaves out just the right combination of settings where something gets missed. And that was the case here. Constants with alternate values, if they're typed into the MDI field, meaning if you come into a field here in one of these screens for a menu, and change the value right here, it would always take the alternate value instead of the primary value. And that was just a minor oversight related to digital triggers. Instrument control calibrations also had a little bit of timing changes due to some serialization of digital input acquisitions and channel acquisitions. And if you want more detail on that, please get with me directly. My name is Anthony Dougherty. You can contact me at adougherty@escspectrum.com, or you can call me directly at 512-250-7891, and I'll put that information up again here at the end of this webinar. If you want more detail on any of the things that you see here in this presentation, or if you have suggestions for firmware, please contact me directly. So that was the reason for the R53 release, a couple of minor bugs that needed to be fixed. Again, the constant only affected you if you were configuring the value through the MDI. If you configured it on a download, it had no effect. In the instrument control calibrations, you would probably only notice this if you had a instrument control calibration where when your physical bit lets up at the end of the phase, there's one more acquisition that takes place there at the end. And if you catch it at just the edge, then your last acquisition doesn't match your physical input. And that's something that has been a bit of a sort of a problem that we've chased for many, many years, and how to deal with that and deal with that gracefully, so that we don't have the last scan be a value that's very different than the previous scans. And again, if you want more details, please see me directly. So let's move down to the next page and talk about R52 updates. So R52, again, there were some kernel upgrades and security upgrades in 6.00. So when you go to 6.00, you cannot downgrade to a previous version. And from version 5.0, you can upgrade from any version 5.0 to any version 6.0 or 6.01. If you do upgrade to version 6.01, you can downgrade to 6.00. We did make sure that that was something that you could do. That way, if you had any troubles, you could easily downgrade to version 6.00. So you may want to make sure you're comfortable with 6.00 before you go to 6.01, because if you jump directly to 6.01 from 5.05, the only place you can go is 6.00. You can't go back to 5.05. And that is due to some of those security improvements that were made. Okay, version 6.01 R52. All of the features in R52 are in R53. R53 just had the 2 bug fixes that we mentioned earlier. So one of the first features is the ability to reset the OOC T flag and grace menu option. So what does this really mean? So what this really means, and what this is really designed for, are those sites that occasionally get a T flag on a parameter due to a time online blip if you're in a long outage or something like that, you can have your clocks expire and you can get a T flag on your data. Now, this is a compliance marking on your data. So this is a setting that you want to be careful with. You can see here in the top left portion of the screen, these are all the same data controller. This is one of the test configurations that we use. I've got 3 channels here, part 75, 26 hour, and grace. And so I've got a part 75 channel configured with a validation type of 3, part 75 validation type. You can see that he's got 26 hours until his 26-hour clock for calibration hits 0, at which time, if he has operational time, he will get the T flag. And there's no current grace. So the first thing I want to do is I want to turn him on and see if we get our grace counter to come on there. Let's see, what did we have there? So let's jump to, I think it's 30. Oh, and on these screens, when you go to a digital output screen, you type the 3-digit digital number, it'll jump you right to it. So I'm going to close that. That should make my F flag go away. And if we wait to the top of the next minute, I think we'll see the grace counter kick in for this guy. And what I want to demonstrate here is I'm going to make him go out of control using an out of control cal. And then I'm going to reset his out of control status. And what I want to demonstrate is that not only does it reset the out of control status, but it will also reset any counters that are associated with that parameter, which is why you need to be careful with using this feature. It's as if you ran a calibration and passed it. And that's what you have to remember when using this reset OOC. Removing the T flag doesn't just remove the T flag, it also resets any counters that might be on that channel. So if you would come online later for some reason and be out of compliance at some later time due to a timer, we won't catch that in real time in the data controller if you've reset your OOC status. So again, you're potentially sort of stomping on compliance by using this feature. It's really designed for those units that are in a long outage, that have a blip on time online, and are going to be out for a long time again, and they just want to make that annoying T flag go away. So let's see here. We didn't get our grace startup, which means I didn't set this thing up quite right. I didn't have a fully offline hour in order to get grace the next time it came online, but that's okay. We'll still be able to see the 26-hour reset. So we'll go ahead and start our go out of control calibration, put him out of control. And this is just a quick 5-second fail and out of control. And now we'll go into our menu that allows us to take the out of control status off. And that is actually located in the calibration menu. It's in the same place as the maintenance menu, sorry, the data menu, mark channel, reset OOC T flag. So from the home screen, it's Charlie Delta. This is where the data channels are, where you can take a channel in and out of maintenance. Same place you can reset the OOC T flag and grace. So it does mention there that you're resetting your timers. You'll get this big scary screen to let you know you're overriding regulatory compliance. I'll have to hit the C key to continue. And then it'll show you the channels that are out of control that you can select from. I'm gonna hit enter on that guy. It's gonna warn you one more time. You'll have to hit S to save. So you can't really do this by accident. And it's see at the bottom of the screen, OOC flag reset on part 75 down here at the left. And sure enough, up here at the top, our T flag is now gone, but you'll also notice that our timer jumped up. And we now have a larger value. It reset the 26-hour clock as if it had passed an online calibration. And you can see that in the minute data, or even this, I don't think I have second data on him. We'll look at the minute data on this guy. You can see we went from 22 to 25. So it reset the clock there when I reset the OOC status. Now, if this is a feature that you don't want in your fleet or on your data controllers, you can disable it. As admin, if you are logged in and you go to your general settings, you can come in here and enable OO reset can be set to no. It'll give you a big warning because you cannot re-enable it without contacting ESC support. Okay, so I'll continue to disable, and once I hit finish configure now and Y to save changes, that's it. You'll have to contact ESC support to get that feature back, sort of like a feature mask at that point. And so you can see now, if I put that channel back under control, wait about 10 seconds, and this time go Charlie Delta to reset the flag. We'll wait for the drift to finish. Please contact ESC support to enable this option. That option is no longer available on this data controller. So it's a hard lock. You can disable it as admin, but you cannot enable it. Okay. And if there are questions and other thoughts on that feature, we can cover them at the end. We'll go ahead and move on to the next feature. And this sort of describes some of what I was just mentioning there here in the manual. New validation types. So another thing that we spent a lot of time on, and we actually tested for, I think, several months, was the new validation types. Now we added validation types 5, 6, and 7. If you take all of the different validation types that are possible and sort of create a binary tree of what's possible in terms of clocks and validation, and whether you're doing arithmetic averaging or integrated averaging, you have 16 different possible combinations. And so we looked at all 16 of them and said, these are probably the only other 3 that would ever make sense to implement. And so we implemented them and said, we're probably never going to implement any of the others. And what it boils down to is what sort of averaging type you have, whether it's quadrants average to the hour or minutes average to the hour. That's the difference between integrated and arithmetic. And what sort of validation you're using, and what sort of clocks you have, if you're going to allow the grace clock or not have the grace clock. And you can see these new types and whether or not you'll have a 26-hour clock as well. And so you can see that 5 and 6 are sort of your part 60 and part 75 validation types. These are sort of like 3 and 4, except that you get no clocks at all on type 5 and it's integrated. And on 6, you have just no grace, but it's arithmetic. So this is just sort of filling in the gaps for some different options that weren't available before. And type 7 is more like type 0, where it uses a percent validation, except that the extended 2 average is built from the extended 1, meaning you could build your hourly average from your 15-minute averages or whatever you might have configured for those 2 different intervals. And so in order to test this properly, we actually did a bunch of sort of back testing against all the original validation types as well. We've got quite a bit of documentation on that now. The original types 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 tested along with types 5, 6, and 7. And again, we spent several months testing all of those. Let's talk about the average alarm flag field. So check ignore flags. With an average alarm, you have the ability to specify whether or not an average alarm will reset or not. Let's take a look at that. So you have this field, ignore state change flags. So typically in the past when this was set, if you configured, let's say, an F flag here, and an F flag was present at the same time an H flag was, it would neither turn on nor turn off. The alarm would not change any kind of state. And it's requested from engineering that we add a way to make it either work on turn off or turn on or both. And so that's what we implemented, was a yes, we'll ignore on set and reset. This is the default legacy behavior. Set means it will ignore only on the set of the alarm, meaning that the alarm will not activate if the ignore state change flag is present. So if the H flag is present and the F flag is present and the check ignore flags is set to set, then the alarm will not activate if that F flag is present. Reset means it'll ignore only on the reset. This way we can control whether the alarm goes on or off based on the flag. Now we didn't implement a no here because that would be the same as if you left the ignore state changes flag blank, which is also a legacy default behavior. If you have questions on that, see me and we can talk about that one some more. That one's a little complex. Oh, here's a fun one to talk about. Trigger DI pattern. So trigger DI patterns for counter channels allow you to use complex logic to combine ors and ands and nots. And we have implemented that now with our digital triggers. So that if you have a complex pattern you want to put on a custom flag or something like that, all you have to do is wire it up through a digital trigger to another pseudo, and you should be able to accomplish any complex pattern for any field you want and just attach it to another pseudo through the digital trigger. So you can see here I have a complex pattern of 25 or 26 and 27. And previously you were never allowed to combine ors and ands. So if we look at the output, you can see that none of those are set. If we jump to 25 and close it, jump to 23, jump to 25 and close it, you'll see 28 comes on, which is what I have my output line configured to here. If I open him and close one, but not the other, still doesn't work. So let's make this 26 and not 27. And we should see that kick on. And there it does. So you can see you can now have complex combinational patterns for your digital triggers. That'll hold for 5 seconds and disappear. And so that works the same way as the counter field does. You can have opening and closing parentheses, numeric ands, ors, and nots. And I think you're limited, I want to say you're limited to 255 character field there. So hopefully you can get everything you need in there. If not, you can always combine two digital triggers together. Automatic logout time. This is for these fields here. If you go to the system configuration general, you have an automatic local and remote logout. These used to be task specific, meaning depending upon which task you logged in on. And by task, I mean the order of these connections here. You have these 8 different tasks that you come in on, and you can see that I'm connected on these 4 here. Those are the 4 screens. You saw a central task just pop up and disappear. That is typically a StackVision communication. This is one of my test controllers, so there may be a StackVision server that hit it for something there just temporarily. But you know, if you come in on task 0 in the past and you set your logout time to 10 minutes, and then later you came in on task 1, you set your task 0, 10 minutes is the default. If you set it to 1 day and then you logged out and came back in, but somehow somebody else had logged in on task 0 and that somehow bumped you to task 1, then you'd get the default timeout of 10 minutes again. And you'd have to wonder, oh, why am I having to go set my timeout again? Why is it bumping back? I thought I set it. Well, that was because these timeout times were specific to the tasks. And so what we've done is we've rearranged this, and we've made it so that the logout remote time 1 day is now global to all of these tasks. It's also global to the web interface in a browser. The local time is what you get on the front panel, either the MDI or the browser. This time here, 10 minutes, controls both the MDI and the browser on the front panel. So all local logout times are the same, all remote logout times are now the same. And we did actually find a bug on upgrade when you first upgrade to R53, you need to come in here and configure the remote time for the browser GUI to work properly. For some reason, it doesn't initialize properly. We've not had time to dig further into it. And the browser will kick you off as soon as you try to log in because it thinks that its timeout has expired. But if you come in here and configure the timeout, it'll take it and then it'll work properly. So you may have to configure that initially once, but then after that, it should survive cold starts, firmware upgrades, any reboots. It's designed to survive all of those settings, much like your IP address. So you should only have to set it once and you should be good from then on out. But remember, it is global to all remote connections. And that is in all 601 plus versions. Okay, see what other features we've got to discuss here. Calibrate individual parameters. So this was a fun one. You now have the ability in a calibration that has multiple configured parameters. Let's take a look at maybe this one. Not that one, that one's only got one. We've only got 1, 2. I thought there were a few of these that had a few more channels. Let's just try it. So if you go to the calibration menu, configure calibration, and then Z, select channels for cal, you can now choose which parameters you want to calibrate. Oh, that one's already running. Let's try. That one's only got 1. That one's only got 1. We may have to configure one with a few more. The way this thing is set up to work is that any phase that has the selected parameters in it will be executed, including any setting of constants, anything that the phase would normally do during normal operation, it will do, and it will run, including going out of control or in control. Now, other parameters that are marked as affected channels will be marked in calibration anytime that any phase from that calibration is run. And I think that's what we would expect. Also, you need to realize that any phases that are empty will not be executed. If you have some sort of delay phase, if the parameter is not in the phase when you select to run for a specific, for calibrating a individual parameter, then that phase will not be executed. So phases that have no data channels will not be executed. So let's just add a few more channels to this guy, just to demonstrate the way that it works. Let's see. Okay. Configure him. Now we can go calibration or configure calibration, start, and go and see. So it only allows you to select channels that are configured in phases. If you notice, I set those up as affected channels, but I did not configure them in the individual phases. Therefore, it will not show them in the choose list. Okay, so let's try that again. CCZ. And you can see I can select just these 2 parameters. And you can select more than one by using the space bar, up and down arrows. This is the same choose menu. It works the same way as the mark parameter in and out of maintenance or on offline or online. So I'll hit enter. You can see it gives me the information that it started the calibration with those 2 channels. You can see that my part 75 here was out of control and it did not reset. It did not go back in control because I did not run against that particular parameter. And if we go look at the calibration record, let's see. and look at building control. I'm gonna just look at PA_items. You see he is there. However, if I look at the R75 parameter, which was not run, see that there is no record there for him. Let's go back a day. Okay. So using that menu, you can select which parameters you want to run cal for, just those. Okay, this just lets you know when you're automatically logged out, you'll get a message. The merge operator, we also made this work with more complex patterns. This one is not subtle at all. So with a merge operator, before you could only do channel name, channel name, and that was all you could ever do. Now, if you want to, you can do channel constant, or you can do channel value, or you can do channel expression, right? Channel 1 plus channel 2. And the merge operator allows you to choose validity, basically. So this is saying if this channel is invalid, use the value of constant 1. If this channel is invalid, use this hard-coded value here. If this channel is invalid, use the combination of these two. And I believe this way this works, I'd have to look this up and verify this in the documentation. If the left side is invalid, it'll take the right side so long as the right side is valid. I'm trying to remember what it does if the right side is invalid. Pretty sure if the right side is invalid, it'll still take the left side. So you want to make sure that if you're choosing validity here, that whatever you're switching it over to is going to be valid when the thing you're trying to get away from is invalid. So those were the main features. There were also some bug fixes, some things related just to the compact. If you're using push polling, you can now use network names with push polling. Some MDI calibration reports were fixed up. Again, for summarized last calibrations and regular calibrations. We changed the behavior of the less than and greater than operators to match what stack vision does. Flags off unused parameters in the less than and greater than operators were being passed along. We now match the way stack vision calculates those, and we don't pass those flags along when the less than or greater than values are chosen. Sort of like the merge operator. If you're going to choose one side of a merge, you don't pass the flags from that side. Same with the less than and the greater than. If you're going to choose one side of a less than or greater than calculation, you don't pass the flags from the other side. Now we had some problems with serial Modbus having problems, and you'd save the system configuration. That's been corrected. The GUI now follows the timeout settings, and there was a bug that if you changed the expected value in the GUI would crash. We fixed that. There was a bug when the power fail menu would show the end time before the start time. This was actually related to the application itself crashing, not a full power failure. If you had booted your system, changed your system time, and then had the application crash, but the data controller did not do a full reboot, you could see a power fail log with a end time before the start time. And this showed up, I believe, in 505 and 600 both. So that behavior is no longer there. You will now correctly see the correct duration of the power fail, no matter how you got to where you are. But that previous bug, if you're experiencing that, can also be corrected by either syncing the time or doing a restart, an actual full restart. But again, fixed in 601, so not an issue in that firmware. We also had an issue with merge channels that use Modbus channels as inputs. Since version 505 firmware, the merge channel would use instantaneous values of the Modbus register instead of what you would expect, and use the every scan interval of the Modbus channel. If you think you may be affected by that, contact me and we can discuss that in deeper terms. And there was some more calibration status minor bug related to the word that was displayed there. So that's everything for 6.01 R53. So I'm going to put up here, let's see, my contact information. If you have any questions, you can contact me directly. And if you have any questions or other things you'd like to discuss, now would be the time to go over those.
So there's one that says, I'm running version 5.03 R16. What is the process to be up to date, and should I wait until after EDRs to update?
It's not critical that you wait, but I mean, with EDRs going on, I could understand why you might want to wait and upgrade after you're done with all of that. So in case something goes wrong, you don't have another headache to deal with. So with 503, you should be able to upgrade directly to 600 or 601. It's just a matter of downloading the firmware and following the firmware upgrade directions in the manual and on the website. And if you've not been through that process before, let me know and I can maybe get in touch with someone that may be able to assist. But as far as EDRs, I mean, it should not affect your current EDR submission, though you will lose any data that you have stored in the data controller because the firmware upgrade does destroy all stored data.
All right, and then someone asked, why would you give the rights of the admin to turn off the grace period, but then remove the rights for reactivating it?
So it's not the grace period, it's the removing the OOCT flag. So by resetting the OOCT flag, you are removing the out of control status, you're overriding compliance, and you're resetting the counters at the same time. So there were some back and forth, actually feedback from multiple different users groups. And the concern was that somebody would disable it as an admin, but then, you know, on a lot of sites, the admin password, everybody's seen it and knows what it is. And so somebody could just re-enable it. So the decision was made that will allow you to disable it, but if you disable it, you're no longer able to implement that feature without having ESC support turn it back on. Now we can turn it back on remotely. It's just a matter of getting into the data controller and re-enabling it. The reason this was done this way was so that people that wanted to disable it across their fleet could, without having to monkey around with the feature masks and have to deal with that for different sites. This was the compromise that was made.
Great, and someone asked, if you disable the reset OOC feature, will it re-enable on the next upgrade?
It should not. We can test that and make sure, but that's another setting that should maintain across firmware upgrades. Just like the logout time and you know how your IP address maintains. If you do a firmware upgrade, you still get your IP. It's in that same bucket. It should remain across firmware upgrade.
And what is the best method to update the firmware?
It depends on what you have available to you. I typically do it using SFTP upgrade, but that's because mine are just right here and they're real close to me on the network. If you don't have that option available to you, you could stick them on a USB thumb drive and do it that way. But one way or another, you got to get that file downloaded and get it onto the data controller. And from there, there's really only one path through the MDI menus to do the upgrade. It really depends on your situation, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
That makes sense. Then has R53 been released?
Oh yeah. Yeah, R53 is up on the website. Let's see here. 601 R53 right here for download. Right there. So
And
yes,
that's in the customer community, correct?
yeah, that is correct.
And final question, how has the update been received by customers? Pretty good?
I'd love to hear. Honestly, don't know. I don't have much feedback on that, fortunately. I think because we released so close to a reporting month that there has not been a lot of adoption. I know that we did have some adoption because that's what helped us to find the bug related to constants and the instrument control calibrations. So I do know that there is some interest in using the reset OOC feature, but really I've not had very much feedback, and I don't expect that I will until probably August. So as you are able to get the firmware and use it, and if you do have feedback, please let me know because I'd love to hear it.
And I think that's all the questions. Thank you, Anthony.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any other thoughts or concerns.